I'm good, very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Keeping up with quarantine and everything that's going on. It's a tough time, but yeah, it's been good. Doing what we can, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. It's been a very strange time, and yeah, I think I've been very lucky with where I am that I can still get out a little bit without seeing anyone really. We're quite rural, so I've been going out cycling quite a bit. But obviously the rest of the days at home, and I've obviously made the move out of squash into a normal job, which I was very much enjoying. But now I've been furloughed, so my proper working life lasted 3 months, and now I'm back to sort of squash.
What's that transition been like? Moving from squash, a 10 year career in squash, to what do you do for a living now?
I'm a financial planner,
Yeah.
so I work for a company called Mazars, which is mainly an accountancy company, but financial planning is we basically work with individuals that are usually sort of quite well off to help them with their personal finances. But I'm in a training scheme, so I'm very much at the start of the journey, just learning it all, doing a lot of exams. And I've really enjoyed it. I was kind of dreading the move out of squash because, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
like most of the guys on tour, I sort of always dreamt of being a squash player since I was probably about 12 years old,
Mm.
and then it was 15 years I did it professionally for, and absolutely
Oh
loved
wow,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
15.
but I've actually been really pleasantly surprised with how much I've loved sort of moving into the real world, and the company I work for is it's sort of very competitive within my team, and I've found a lot of elements of it that I really really enjoy, and also it's just been so different that it's been quite refreshing. I hadn't realised, but I think perhaps in the last year or so on tour, I'd actually lost a little bit of that um, passion for it, just based on the fact that it all felt a bit deja vu. So a lot of the tournaments, most of the tournaments I was going to was the same tournaments I've been going to for probably 10 years, since I got within the top 35, 40 in the world. The tournaments were the same tournaments in the same squash clubs. A lot of the times it was the same hotel, the same restaurants, um, and a little bit of the excitement of it had gone without me really realizing.
This interview, I'm gonna talk to you about your career as a squash player, and from the beginning of you playing squash as a junior to where you got to in your success, and your downfalls and your ups, and to where you are now. So when did you first start playing squash? Where did that interest come about?
I was 8. I was absolutely loved playing sport, and I was quite lucky. My parents let me do any sport I wanted. I got to give it a go. And at school, there was a sheet went up on the notice board saying, "Do you want to try playing squash?" I didn't really know what squash was, but it was a new sport, and it was at lunchtime.
Mm.
So I put my name down, and I
Also,
was
they had
quite
it at your school.
no. So it wasn't at the school. What happened was a coach came in, um, and he was giving a taster session. So it was once a week for 4 weeks. So you got 4 sessions, and it was mini squash. So it was
Mm.
with a sponge ball and a short racket. And what he did was he drove a group of, I think there was probably about 12 of us that signed up and got chosen to the local leisure centre, and we did these 4 sessions. And we didn't actually play until the fourth session. I think the first 3 sessions were all sort of bouncing the ball on the racket and hitting the ball along the floor and things like that. And I'd played a bit of tennis, and I was getting really bored with it. I thought, why are we doing all these things that are too easy? Fourth week, we started playing some games, and I was sort of the best out of the 12 of us that were there. So obviously it's nice when you win at things. And the coach said afterwards, anybody that has enjoyed it can come along on a Saturday. So going to the local leisure centre on a Saturday, and it all really took off from there quite quickly, really. At the time, I was doing a lot of different sports.
Yep.
And quite strangely, really, I very much said straight away to my parents, this is my favourite, I want to do more of this. And if it came down to a different sport and squash being on the same day, I always straight away said, no, I want to do squash. And yeah, I think by the time I was about 12, I was starting to really, out of my own choice, start to cut down the other sports and just say, no, I want to play squash as much as I can.
Was it from 12 onwards you started entering tournaments and it started to get a bit more serious, or how long was that gap?
It's from Guernsey. So Guernsey's a little island, so to actually get to play anyone, I mean, the first probably 2 years, there's lots of other kids there that I was playing, and it's just the sort of start of it, really. I think I actually played my first tournament in England when I was just before my 10th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So they took the squash club took a trip, and a load of us went over and played the Hampshire Closed. So that was the start of it, really, when I started to actually see, proper junior squash players. And I think my first tournament I got beat 27-love, and it was a bit of a I know. There was a guy called Jordan Sopp who was from Sussex. I think it was the Hampshire Open, actually. And they're the sort of memories that it was kind of like a bit of a eye-opening but very enjoyable experience that kind of kept me interested. 11 years old, I started going quite a lot to England to play tournaments, and I got into the rankings at under 12s at the time. And then the following year it moved to under 13s, so I stayed in the same age group playing the same sort of kids. And by then I got up to, I think I got to 2 in the country under 13s, so sort of started to improve quite quickly by that age.
Looking back at it, what was your funnest aspect of it? Was it the matches? Was it the training? Was it meeting new people, like making new friendships through squash? Or did you have any friends before squash who then took a similar path to you, or did you meet them along the way more than you had them with you, sort of thing?
For one, I just loved playing squash. So actually in Guernsey, I do a lot of solo training. I do a lot on my own, actually.
So
but
was that the funnest thing, you reckon?
No. So what? That was kind of a bit of a driver for the fact that what I really enjoyed was going off the island at weekends, and going and sort of. If you think of Guernsey as kind of being like a town in the UK, but you can't go anywhere else. There's no roads to anywhere else. You're stuck there. We're all in isolation at the moment in our own houses, and I think Guernsey is a small place, and I quite early sort of felt that slight isolation there. I actually really enjoyed going at the weekend and seeing the UK, and in Guernsey, for example, we didn't have, and we still don't have, any fast food. So McDonald's, when I went to a squash tournament, we'd always go and have a McDonald's because it was a real novelty to me.
So you didn't have any fast food restaurants, nothing like that?
No, so there was that side to it. And then when I got a bit older and I started going to national squads and stuff, then that was when I sort of made sort of very close friends, which particularly with Tom Richards, who was in my age group, became one of my best mates still to this day, really. So we ended up sort of rooming together from probably about 13, 14 years old a lot, and until very recently still were. So just turning 14, I was the best squash player on the island. So if I didn't have that chance to go off to England regularly, then it becomes boring because you're just the best and you can't play anyone else and you're not learning and you're not progressing. So it's the whole package of it. I loved playing squash, but then I also enjoyed the travel. The travel also enabled me to learn more as a squash player, and it became a cycle of I just enjoyed all of it, really. I think the real time that I sort of set my mind on trying to be a professional squash player was in 2002. I went to the Commonwealth Games in Manchester. So I was 15 years old, and I'd never actually seen a professional squash match live. And I got to go to, as part of Team Guernsey, to the Commonwealth Games. I played Stuart Boswell, who was 3 in the world at the time, got beat 27-love again. Played on a glass court for the first time ever, and I was there for 2.5 weeks just mixing with all the pros. So, I've got both Peter Nicol and Jonathan Powers shirts from that event. I got to speak, went up and spoke to them and asked for their shirts and got them to sign them and all that sort of thing, rubbing shoulders with those guys and watching them training. That's when I sort of realised this is what I want to do. And that was around the same time as I was sort of becoming the best in the country for my age. Quite different now for kids watching squash because we've got squash TV.
Yeah.
So even, kids all around the world in places where they don't have professionals or tournaments, they can watch all the guys from 1 in the world to 100 in the world. They can go online on YouTube and watch it. You can go on Squash Site and you can see the results. But when I was younger, back in my day, I had 2 VHS videos, one of the Tournament of Champions and one of the Al Haram in Cairo, and they both had Jonathan Power and Peter Nicol playing in them. I think one of them had Ahmed Barada and another had Paul Johnson on it. But those were the only professional players that I'd seen. It was the same 2 games, and if I wanted to follow what was happening, then I had to get the Squash Player magazine. I got it sent once a month, and I'd look at who won the tournaments. It was very different trying to follow the game, and I couldn't really, I knew all the names, but I didn't actually know how they played or what their style was or anything like that. So to then go to the Commonwealths and see all these people that I've been reading about that were just names on a page to me, and all of a sudden they were squash styles, they were people that I got to speak to. It's just really, really sort of eye-opening experience.
Was your coach helping you at this time as a junior?
Coach that came into my school was a guy called Chris Coughlin, who was just a local coach. He wasn't a player of any particular merit, but I carried on working with him for many, many years, and he was a very good coach. And then when I went to the Commonwealths, there was a guy called Gareth Webber, who now coaches in America, in San Francisco. And he helped me a lot for a couple of years, as well as Chris. And yeah, he was a big influence. And then he sort of moved to America at the same time as I was turning 16, and decided to move to England to go to boarding school so that I could sort of follow or try and be a squash player a little bit more. I realised that I didn't have enough people to train with in Guernsey, so
that's a big sacrifice.
So I went to do my A-levels in England, and I worked with a guy called Mike Harris in Brighton, who now coaches in Birmingham. And those were the sort of 3 in my junior days. They were my 3 coaches that had big influence on me.
You played Rami Shaw as a junior?
Yeah, so I played Rami for the first time. I saw him for the first time in under 12. So in under 12s, Tom Richards was by far the best player in England. Yeah. And I played him a few times and got a few points off him. That's how much better he was than everyone else. And in the British Junior Open, Tom got to the final and was playing Rami, who was a year younger than him. And Tom had got there without losing a game. He was by far better than anyone else. And Rami beat him 27-love in the final. So then I played Rami a number of times, and he was just. I actually played him after just after he'd had his knee operation, and he had what I can only describe as a bionic knee on. It was one of those braces that you'd see the 70-year-old at the club wearing with metal on it. It must have weighed half a stone. He beat me 3-0, and he was on one leg. He couldn't move, but he was just far too good. I mean, he just served. He went and stood, big lob serve because he knew he couldn't move. Went and stood to where I was going to hit it. He knew where I was going to hit it before I did, and then he just put it in the nick. And we were about 15 or 16 years old. It was just unbelievable. Yeah.
So on that topic, how did you, with playing people like Rami, how did you cope with winning and losing as a junior?
I would sulk a lot when I lost.
Yeah.
I think one thing I wish I'd sulked less and maybe like thought a little bit more about sort of watching things over on videos and stuff like that. But I did always have an attitude where when I lost, I was always really keen to get back on court and just work harder. I wish I'd maybe thought about working a bit smarter, but I very much thought if I lost a match or had a bad performance, I'd always be back at the club the next day, staying a little bit longer than I had been before, even from a very, very young age. I used to sort of chuck my toys out of the pram a little bit on court. I used to shout and chuck rackets around, and my dad once told me that I disgraced my family because I'd behaved so badly, and that if I did it again, he would take my bike, which was like my pride and joy, and sell it on in the newspaper. And I think after that, my dad doesn't mess around, so after that I behaved a lot better and I didn't chuck my racket.
Moving on to your professional career, a bit further down the line, what was your biggest high in your career? Like, what do you cherish and remember the most out of everything that's gone on over your 15 years of playing squash professionally?
That's a very good question. Winning my first PSA event was massive. I'd had a really bad injury. I'd been out for about 6 months, and I went to Taiwan, which was a really big journey. And I'd spent all my money to get there because I just needed to play an event because my ranking was plummeting because I hadn't played anything, and I didn't really expect anything because I hadn't played for ages and I was out of shape, and won my first event sort of out of nowhere really. So that was pretty cool. I think winning the European Championships with England was really big, partly because I put in such a good performance in the final that sort of sealed it for us really. I played Lucas Serm, and it goes on games and points count back, so I was sort of hoping to win and trying to win without losing too many games, and I actually lost, I think it was only 8 or 9 points in the match. So I played really, really well, and it pretty much wrapped it up for the team, so that was really big.
Saying that, what was your hardest ever physical squash match?
The longest match I had was with Julian Illingworth, US #1 for many years, in a town called Sudbury in Canada, and we were playing at this club that was awful. The courts were just panel courts, so the ball just bounces forever. It was a 19-inch tin. I think it was quite close to a swimming pool, so it was really like humid inside, and you could not put the ball away, and we played for 2 hours and 12 minutes. Didn't really know what was going on when I was starting to cramp, and I didn't really know how long I did or didn't have, sort of to carry on playing. Yeah, that was pretty tough.
In transition now from your professional career, from losing and winning, to your junior career, what is there a remarkable difference, or do you still get a bit angry on court, or a bit frustrated with yourself, or do you still sulk a bit, or what goes on?
My least favourite thing about professional squash, I think, was probably always losing when I was halfway around the world and knowing that I couldn't. I was going to be stuck there for 3 days. So
I hate that.
even in a really nice place, somewhere like Hong Kong, you're miles and miles from home. If you've had a bad loss, then the first thing I wanted to do was to get out of there and reset and be at home and try and forget about that loss, or forget about it until I watch the video, try and learn from it, and then put it aside and forget about it, rather than staying in the same place and feeling like all I was doing was really thinking about the loss and waiting until I could get home. That was probably my least favourite thing about playing on tour, actually.
Did you yourself pay a lot of attention to how your opponent was acting, and did you use that to your advantage if they were acting negatively?
I think it's an interesting one, because with squash you're on court with one other guy and you do feel what's happening. But for me, it was always I had to read what was happening with them to some extent in terms of the tactical elements. But if I worried too much about what was happening with them, then it would actually take away from me focusing on my game.
Mm-hmm.
So an example of that is I've played people that have got injured, or they've been absolutely shattered or cramping, and they can't really move very much anymore. But as soon as I thought to myself, oh, this guy can't move, I'd sort of not doubt, but I'd second guess what I was doing myself. And that would take away from my game. So instead of just going, oh, he can't move as well now, stick to the game plan, carry on playing the same game, because the game I play is to try and move the other guy. That's how we play squash. You try and think about a different way of doing it, and it takes away, it's taking away from your normal game that you practice every day. That's the best game that you can play. So whilst I would try and feel what was happening with someone, and maybe feel if they were getting tired and I could push a little bit more than anything, I'd just try and concentrate on my own game plan and what was happening internally with me.
On court, what was your signature shot, you think?
I think the shot that won me the most points in my career was definitely my backhand straight drop.
So moving on then to where you are now in your retirement, how are you finding retirement? How are you finding, or how did you find moving from squash and travelling around the world every week to doing what you do now?
Well, it's early days, and like I said to you at the start, it's a bit funny because after 3 months of being in a normal job, I'm now furloughed and very much back to, well, definitely the same same position that I would be in if I was still a squash player. But I was really, really enjoying it. I think I've travelled for so long that it's quite nice to not have to keep a bag half packed at home.
Settle down a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of movies in a few months that I haven't seen, rather than having all the latest movies on the plane. Yeah, I've been really enjoying it.
Nice. What aspect do you miss the most out of your squash career?
Whenever I trained with someone, we'd always score in some way. We'd very often put something on a game at the end of training, whether it's a coffee or someone buys lunch or some court sprints, and I really enjoyed that.
Looking back on your career, then, what years did you think you played your best squash, and do you think you maximised your potential in squash?
I think it was 2015, 2016 was when I played my best squash. I always thought I could get more, so I think I did everything I could to maximise my potential. So the answer to that question is probably yes, but I think I always wanted more, and I always felt that I could get better. So in that sense, there's a bit of me that says, "Oh, you could have done a little bit better." But I think I'd have that in anything I do. I'm absolutely content that I tried my best, and
you're proud of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
that's good.
I would consider my bogey player for quite a while was Adrian Waller.
Yeah.
I absolutely hated playing him, and actually for a good couple of years, particularly those 2015, 2016, I got a couple of really good wins against him, but I just found him so difficult to play against, and he was one guy that I found he could just hit a normal shot, he could hit a straight drive, that he wasn't trying to hold it at all, and for some reason I could not tell where it was going to go. I always found when I played him, he was hitting the ball with his body in the way, so I couldn't even see the ball. So I was trying to find it on the front wall rather than watching. Yeah, it was. I absolutely hated playing him, and I found even when I did get those wins over him for a couple of years, where I sort of had the better of him, I was mostly playing what I would call playing fetch. I was just getting the ball back until, running around until he got tired or made some errors, rather than actually feeling like I was a better squash player than him, because he just took away everything I was trying to do. I couldn't do against him. He just made me play badly.
So moving away from squash now, and more about you and your personality. If you could invite 3 people to a dinner party, past or present, who would they be and why?
Anyone. David Attenborough.
Yeah.
Because he is a legend, and without a doubt, he would just have so many amazing stories, and we all know what he brings to the table. I haven't really thought about this before. Richard Branson.
Interesting one.
I saw him on the news earlier, so he's in my mind, but I have read his book. I find him really, really interesting, and I'd just love to get to quiz him. There'd have to be some eye candy in there. I don't want an all-male dinner party.
Yeah.
Margot Robbie, she can come, yeah.
If you were a drink, what drink would you be?
I don't think I'd be anything too exciting, actually, if I'm honest. I'd probably be a fizzy water. It's a little bit different to normal water, so yeah.
With a little bit of taste.
Maybe a hint of lime, not much more.
Yeah. If you could accidentally hit one player with a squash ball, which player would it be?
Very difficult one, actually. I think it would be Amir Atlas Khan.
If there was one moment of a match in your career you wish you could have changed the outcome, for example, if you lost, which moment would it be and why? Like, for which tournament, for example?
I played Simon Rosner in the last 16 of the British Open, and I had him absolutely dead and buried, and I somehow lost it, and I'd never made the quarterfinals of a World Series event, so that would have taken me to the semis. I think it was probably that one.
Quick fire questions. You can answer yes, no, or no comment. I'm going to give you 5 questions, and yeah, you answer yes, no, or no comment. Alright? So, question 1. Have you ever thought about becoming a squash coach?
Yes.
Have you had an argument with a PSA player off court?
Yes.
Have you ever been given a conduct warning to which meant you had to forfeit the match?
No.
Have you ever hoped another player loses a squash match so you didn't have to play them in the next round?
Yes.
And finally, would you like your children to become professional squash players?
Yes.
6 squash player names, and you have to give me 1 word to describe them best.
Okay.
Alright? So, number 1, James Willstrop.
Classy.
Number 2, Nick Matthews.
Aggressive.
Number 3, Ramir Shaw.
Oh, genius.
Number 4, George Parker.
Funny.
Number 5, Declan James.
Thinker.
And number 6, Simon Rosner.
Tree chopper.
If you could talk to the juniors out there now, what advice would you give them, and for the people watching today?
To enjoy it, I think the key has to be to enjoy your squash. If you don't enjoy your squash, you're not going to improve. It is a game. I think sometimes we can get when we're playing a lot of squash or doing anything a lot, it becomes very, very important. But actually, it's just a game. So the more you realise that, then the more you will take more from it, both as a person and in the way you play, I think. And then I think the next thing is just to see things as a process. I think understanding that Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's not necessarily about winning every single match. It's about learning as much as you can and understanding that process of where you want to be in the future. That's something I learned. I saw myself. The best players did that better than anyone else, particularly in England, looking at how Nick Matthew and Laura Mazzaro became the best in the world. Both of them were definitely better at seeing the process, the long-term process, and sticking to it than anyone else, in my opinion. And that's something I sort of learned.
That has been the end of the interview. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time. It's been funny and surprising, and very as a eye-opener to some things, and I learned, and hopefully the viewers at home learned something about you that they didn't know before. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below for what you think, because your feedback is key. And I'll see you in the next one.